Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. Today I'm here to do my July wrap up. This has been another crazy year. Not quite as crazy as the last one, but still a very eventful year, I feel like. Here we are in August, and let's get to it because I've got a lot of books to talk to you all about. The first of which I finished in July, and that was Daughters of the Stone by Dahlma Llanos-Figueroa. So this is a book about slavery in Puerto Rico. I saw, I think it was the Read So Lit group read it. The Read So Lit group is organized by Didi over at Branco Reading. I will link all of their information down below. I remember just them talking about it on social media, and I knew I had to read it, especially because it's a book set in the Caribbean, but more specifically in Puerto Rico, and I don't see a lot of books that talk about the history of slavery in Puerto Rico, and that is basically what this book does. It traces a line beginning with a woman that is enslaved, taken out of Africa, brought to Puerto Rico, and there she has a connection to a goddess that kind of ends up protecting her to some extent and making sure that her line still has that connection to the gods and into magic. And so you follow as each new generation of women in that family have to wrestle with that connection to magic, whether they believe in it, whether they don't, how it affects their personal lives, how it affects their position in Puerto Rico. It's such a good story. I really liked it, and I think a lot of people would really like this if you're into that like multi-generational storylines, but especially if you're interested in Caribbean books and books that engage with the issue of slavery and race. The next book that I finished, I read thanks to Alba over at her channel name is Seriela. So this is La Guaracha del Macho Camacho by Rafael Sanchez. So this is a Puerto Rican classic. I was clearly in a little bit of a Puerto Rican kick here. But this is a book that Alba had talked about a while back, and I went ahead and got a hold of it because I never read anything like this. It is told in a very poetic form, in almost like song form. Not almost, a lot like poetry and song. And I mean, poetry and the lyrics of music they overlap a lot. This is a book in Spanish. I did not see any English translation, so this is just going to be for those of you who are Spanish readers. But in it, there's a lot of like commentary about Puerto Rican politics, about the U.S. and colonialism. There's a lot of satire of all the social classes. There's a lot of colloquialisms, and that was the hardest part about reading this book in Spanish. I'm a native Spanish speaker, so like the actual reading it in Spanish was not an issue for me, but there was a lot of words in here that were Puerto Rican specific colloquialisms that I didn't know. And so I'm actually grateful to Alba who had me pick up this particular edition because it comes with a really great introduction that goes through a lot of the themes and the history of the writer of this particular book, and also like it's heavily footnoted. The story is heavily footnoted, and so there's a lot of explanation of like in translation, essentially. Not really translation because the footnotes are in Spanish, but a kind of translation of what the colloquialisms mean. And so even though it was written in a different time period and the Spanish is the Spanish of a different country, I really enjoyed it, and it was challenging, and it was great to be reading in Spanish again. Yeah, that was just a really good book, so thank you, Alba. The next book that I finished was Three to Love. This is by Rebel Carter, and it's book number 4 in the Gold Sky series. I did not know that this was book 4 in the series until I started reading it, and then I was like, oh well. With romance novels, you can usually go out of order, and that's perfectly fine, and that was the case here. This is a male female romance. So we're following three main characters. The main female character is the one we primarily follow. She grew up in a, polyamorous household where she has two dads and a mother, and that's what she wants. That's what she's looking for out of romance and love, but she's not finding it. She's been trying to forge kind of friendships and romance amongst the men in the area which she lives, and it's set, this is a book set in like the Old West, in I think in Arizona, I believe. No, Montana. Okay, Montana. And it's a town that's very open to these things, but there's still a line, right, in which, these polyamorous relationships are allowed to a large extent, and nobody looks at them like funny, but there's a line of respectability that is also expected. What did I think of this book? I think this is my first male-female romance. And that aspect of it I thought was really well done. I liked each of the characters. I liked the way they interacted with each other. I enjoyed the way the romance between all three develops. This is a book, though, that is not going to be for everyone. And it's not even because it's a male-female romance. It's because it can be very slow at times. And you're very into the head of the female protagonist. And she at times can be like, you want her to all right, honey, you're into these out of the box things. And yet she can be very traditional in some ways, but it's just this really, it's kind of a slow burn, really beautifully developed relationships. Again, if you don't like really slow romances, you're not gonna like this one. But in the end, I ended up really, really enjoying it. There's a really nice payoff in following the story, and at first I was a little bit frustrated with it at first, and then I just, the beauty of what Rebel Carter is doing really, just hit me. So I want to read more Rebel Carter, and instead of going back in the series, I think I'm just going to look forward to more of what Rebel Carter is publishing and more recently, because I can tell there are some elements here of okay, she's developing as a writer, and I don't want to go back and see her working through some of those issues. I want to see her move forward and improve. So I ended up giving this a 4 stars on Goodreads, because it was really emotional book. That's the key here. That's the key to this book. It's slow burn, and it's incredibly romantic and emotional. And at the end, I felt all the emotions of our main characters, and so I was right there with her, and so it ended up working for me. Where at first I almost thought I was going to DNF it. Maybe I need to do a standalone video just reviewing this book, because I feel like it's a really complex book. It's multi-layered. I have a multi-layered response to it, but in the end, I would recommend it to people who are into really emotional, slow burn romance, and also male-female romance. So what that means, by the way, for those of you who aren't familiar with the romance genre, is that there is sexual interaction between the two men. There we go. The next book that I finished in July is Patsy by Nicole Dennis-Benn. So I have a standalone video for this book, which I will link down below for anybody that's interested. So I will limit what I say here to say that I loved it. I loved Patsy. It's a book that's difficult to read. There's a lot of pain and suffering. You're following a woman a female immigrant coming from Jamaica to the U.S., and she is in love with a woman, and she hadn't been able to explore that relationship in Jamaica, and now there's a ton of roadblocks preventing her from exploring and fully being herself in the U.S. She's also left a daughter behind in Jamaica, and I think that's a theme that not everybody's gonna like. But one that I enjoyed of she has this daughter, but she didn't want to be a mother. And so she actually resents her motherhood a lot. And I enjoyed seeing that particular depiction of motherhood, because we tend to expect mothers to behave in particular ways, always very selfless, and the reality is much more complex. The next book that I finished, I also have a standalone review for, and that is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. So I will link that video below as well for anyone interested. The short version of this is that I loved it. This is a book in which we follow a trans and Latinx main character whose family practices magic, brujeria, and as a brujo, Yadriel hasn't been allowed to, he hasn't been initiated into the family magic because he's trans, and his father doesn't think that the rituals will work. And yet Yadriel goes through with the ritual on his own, and then he summons the ghost of a dead schoolmate, Julian. And it's also a bit of a murder mystery because Yadriel's cousin has been killed, and they have to figure out what happened to his cousin. And it's a beautiful, sweet, fantastic story. This is the kind of book too that even if you don't read a lot of young adult books, I think you will like it, just because of the other themes and elements in this story, and how fantastically well done and how well written this book is. It really does deserve all of the praise that it gets on social media. The next book I finished was The Ivies by Alexa Donne. I've seen a lot of Alexa Donne over at Mara's channel. Her channel's Books Like Whoa. You're all probably following her channel's quite big now, but I was really interested in this being a kind of thriller, a young adult kind of thriller mystery set at a boarding school. That's what sold this book to me, and it was really well done. Like, I binge read this. Like, I just had to read it in like 2 nights. I just stayed up late reading it because it was compelling. I was really into the mystery. You have the drama is all set around these group of girls, these group of friends who all are applying to Ivy Leagues. But the queen bee of the group has decided that they all can only apply to like one of the Ivy Leagues so that they can all get in. And then the friend group ends up doing all kinds of weird things, and there's a death, and the death has to be investigated. There's issues of class, of race that pop up, and it brought back a lot of that drama for me, the drama of, like, you know, when everybody's applying for college and high school, and how dramatic and like how high stakes it feels. In reality, it's not that high stakes. It feels in the moment like it's really high stakes and competitive. Like, okay, I did not end up going to UCLA, but I was accepted to UCLA. And there was a girl in my AP English class who, that was her dream school, and she did not get in. So I did not want to announce to anybody that I was accepted into UCLA, except I told one of the few people in that AP class that I actually was friendly with, and she announced it to the whole class. And the death stare I got from this other girl. And I could just see it, right? Like, so maybe some of it was my own insecurities, but I could see that they all thought it was affirmative action that had gotten me into UCLA. And anyway, it brought back a lot of that, like, high stakes, really weird high school drama that feels really real at the time, and it was really, really well written. I felt like the Ivies. There are a lot of like young adult tropes, so if you don't read young adult at all, then you probably will not like this book. But if you can read young adult books and like that murder mystery, you know, Ivy League college drama, you will like that book. The next book I finished was Arsenic and Adobo. This is the Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mystery. This is the first in the series by Manansala. I love this. So I've been looking for more diversity in cozy mysteries because I used to really love cozy mysteries. I had read most of the Cat Who books. I think it was Lillian Jackson Brown was the author. Um, so so I've been, the cover for this is what drew me in, of Arsenic and Adobo. It has a wonderful cover. And it follows a main character who has come back to her hometown to help her tia, her aunt, with her restaurant. The restaurant's in need of help. She's helping at the restaurant. Her ex, who is now a restaurant reviewer and has been giving the restaurant a really hard time and very bad reviews, comes in with his stepdad. They eat, they order a bunch of food, they eat, and then at the end of the meal, the ex drops dead. It was a really, really good, solid cozy mystery. You have to be into cozy mysteries to like this one. Like, there's that, it's a murder mystery, but it's not a thriller. It's a small town. It's a lot of interpersonal relationships and somebody, sleuthing out clues. Some of the work that the main character does is a little like, honey, you're missing some connections here. Like, so I wanted her to make those connections a little faster because I had already made them as I was reading them about what was happening. But other than that, I thought it was a feel-good, cozy mystery and hit the spot for me. The next book I finished was Little Disasters by Sarah Vaughan. This was the book that my book club picked to read for July, and I didn't like it. I really hate not liking books, but this is a book that it's like a domestic drama. It tries to be a thriller, but it's not a thriller at all. The story starts off with a doctor who's called down to the ER. She's a pediatrician, and one of her friend's kids has been brought into the ER, and there are clear signs of potential abuse from a baby, for abuse of a baby. But it's her friend, and she knows her friend is a good mother and would have never done anything to the baby. And then you get into the mind of this mother who's been having a really hard time with this baby, who is dealing with a lot of anxiety, who is clearly dealing with postpartum depression. And so you're in these heads a lot, and you're in the heads of like people around who are trying to figure out what happened. Did she actually hurt her child? Was it the father? Could it have been somebody else? Like, what happened? And I was just like, I've read this plot in other books, and I did not need to read a whole book that looked at all of that. Yeah, maybe I should just put it at that. If like, just by knowing the premise, I think you will know whether it's a book for you or not. It was not a book for me, and if I had not been reading it for book club, I wouldn't have even picked it up. And if I had for somehow picked it up, I would have definitely DNF'd it. But because it was for book club, I finished reading it, and it was just not a hit for me. The next book I finished was The Evening and the Morning by Ken Follet. So this is a prequel to his Kingsbridge series. I've actually have read Follet's other book. I did not read the first one. Let me see, which did I read? I think it's the last one in the Kingsbridge series. Yeah, the second one. So I read World Without End. But the first one in the series is The Pillars of the Earth, and then there's A Column of Fire. So this is a prequel to all of those, and it starts off with a Viking attack. I'm going to limit what I say in here because this is part of my reading historical fiction series. I will just say that right from the very start, from the first couple of sentences, I was annoyed with the way Follet describes the historical time period. I'm not an expert on Viking history, but I'm pretty sure the version we get of the Vikings in this book is like the Wikipedia version of it. Meaning, I don't know that there's anything glaringly incorrect, but also it's not very nuanced and it's not very complex version of the Vikings, who are actually very interesting and much more complex than they're given credit, and the way they're used. Viking history is actually something that has been appropriated by white supremacists, and that I think historians need to do a better job of fighting, so that the history most people know and understand about Vikings is actually accurate and not this white supremacist version. Anyway, I still gave this book, I gave it 2.5 stars because there were several things that annoyed me. Another element in here that I will say, I'm going to save most of my thoughts for a video that's coming up, but there's a lot of rape. And that is common in Follet's books. He uses the excuse of, it's common in this time period. And I'm like, okay, yeah. But he uses it in a way to like make his plot more interesting, to bring challenges to the characters, and it feels unnecessary and contrived, especially when you're like on the third rape and you're like, oh, again? Okay, like how much of this detailed rape descriptions can I take for no real reason? At that point in the story, towards the end, he did not need to insert this rape. And actually that story should have wrapped up earlier anyway. However, what Follet does in this series, in the King's Britain series, that I think is why people read him so much, is he writes really compelling characters that you want to root for. He does he's been accused of writing the same characters over and over again, and yes, there are certain archetypes that he likes, but there are archetypes that people like too, that I was enjoying reading about. You know, you have the artisan, the architect who is poor but is extremely talented, and he has all these roadblocks on the way, and you have the woman who is fighting misogyny and patriarchy. So they are interesting characters that you want to root for. So if you want to read the evening and the morning, go ahead. I have nothing against anybody reading that book. I had my issues with it. The next book that I finished, I will also try to limit my thoughts on because it's another historical fiction book that is part of my project. This is The Women of Chateau Lafayette. Somebody recommended this in my last Historian Reads Historical Fiction video. And I was like, all right, I'll read it. It follows 3 different timelines, the 3 different women. One is, Adrienne Lafayette. So it's General Lafayette's wife. Then we follow Beatrice Chandler. So going back, so Lafayette's wife, Adrienne Lafayette. So we get to see the American Revolution and the French Revolution through her eyes. Beatrice Chandler was a real woman philanthropist who ends up turning the Lafayette Castle into a place for children who have been abandoned. So through her eyes, we get to see World War I. And both of those women were real women. And then lastly, we see Marthe Simon, who is a completely fictionalized character. And through her eyes, we see World War II. So just with that premise, if you like it and you like historical fiction, I think you will like this book. If you don't, stay away. But I will have more detailed thoughts in the next video. I think there's a lot more to dissect in this particular book. There were elements I really enjoyed, and just some minor critiques that I have of it. So if you're interested in my thoughts, stay tuned. That's probably coming next week, that video. And then lastly, I technically finished this book August 1st, but it was like at 2 a.m. So I'm counting it for July. I finished The Old Drift by Mamwali Serpell. So this is a book set in Zambia, and it's a really long book. I didn't realize how thick it was till I saw people. This was the Read So Lit pick for July. I will link Dee Dee's channel down below, as I said, Brown Girl Reading, and I will link the Read So Lit social media accounts, because I really love what Dee Dee does with that. With the Read So Lit group. So I was really intrigued about this book. I love reading books set in Africa, in different parts of Africa. This one, I have mixed feelings on. There are parts of this that I really enjoyed. What you're doing is following 3 different generations of family from the beginning of European colonialism down into the present and into the future a little bit. Some of these characters were really interesting. It's a book that's difficult to read because I'll just right off the bat tell you, like, nobody has a happy story. They're all difficult, hard lives. And that was really interesting to see. And it was really interesting to see the effects of colonialism, the way the author depicts them through the eyes of these characters. And yet I had a hard time at the beginning getting into the book. Others didn't. There was a live discussion on YouTube in which Didi, Tatiana at Musical Tati, and Michael, I will leave their channels linked down below as well, discussed the book with the rest of us in the live chat. And the discussion was so good. I really appreciated everybody's thoughts. So a lot of other people really liked the beginning of the book, and I had a hard time with the start. But then I got into it. You just get into these chapters for these people's lives, and you really, like, a lot of them are in difficult positions, right? The social economic backgrounds just are not, they're not set up to succeed, and so you see them go through their difficulties. But other characters are set up for success, right? Socially and economically, and yet, because of the choices they make, they go down these paths. And there were some of those stories I just really enjoyed. As tragic as they were, I really, and the writing was superb. This is actually a debut novel, and especially for a debut novel, it's really impressive. I think pretty much we all agreed in the discussion that the ending was not so great. As some of the group have decided that they want to reread this book sometime in the future. I loved what the book was doing. I loved the writing. I would not discourage anyone from reading it, but I don't think I would reread this book. It's a lot, and you have to, like, be in the mindset of, like, okay, I'm gonna engage with this book actively, and it's gonna force me to think and feel and everything. And that's not always for everyone. It's a lot. This book asks a lot of its readers, and I like that a lot. But also, like, you're not always in the mental space to be able to do that. Whew. Okay. Those are all the books that I read in July. If you've read any of these, if you're interested in hearing me say a little bit more about any of them, feel free to let me know down below. I'm always happy to chat about any and all of these books. And here's hoping that August ends up being a good reading month for me and for all of you. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.